All right, so I'm going to go back to my original landscape version because I ended the last video showing you how to do image adjustments, right? So image adjustments are you take a layer, and you can see in my history how quickly with just 2 different adjustments, it started like this. I'll zoom in. Just by using image adjustments and levels, I can make it match in lights and darks. And then using image adjustments and color balance, I can make it match a little bit better in terms of its color temperature. And then there's one more image adjustment that we use, which is called hue saturation. And that's because both of these references are more highly saturated than this one. So this is where you can actually increase the saturation of the color, and you can change the hue, which is different than the temperature. The hue is the actual frequency of color, the color itself. And you can select. So if I need more cyan or more blue, I can select that in this image and try to bring it out. There's just not a lot in there. I can darken it. I can even push my reds just more towards that if I need to. Maybe push my yellows. So these are the 3 adjustments we're going to learn throughout the class. So I'm going to close this. I'm not even going to save it. I'm not going to worry about all the new features of this new version of Photoshop. And the other problem with using a new version of Photoshop is it will not connect with your memory. So that's why we always save things into our folders, right? So I need my assignment 1. I need my PSD. It looked like it wasn't there, but it's there. That's why I mark it green. I always put it with my name. So if I now open this with Photoshop, where did Photoshop? Oh, there it is. Now the newest version of Photoshop is my default. It has all my layers. It has my guiding sketch. It's cropped down, but not all the way to my framing. And now I can go through layer by layer and play with these image adjustments. I need to figure out my background. So I'm going to start with that. I want this to be moody and kind of gothic jungle, right? So I like this intense lighting. So what I'm going to do is actually put this on top, and I'm going to change it to a mode called screen mode. So it gives me just the lighting. That kind of works. And I think I'm going to grow it. So you're really trying to figure out your lighting in this step and your coloring. So I think I want that light source, right at the corner of the cathedral. Okay, then what do I actually need? Let's take it off of screen mode so you can see what I'm doing. I just need this thing. I need this light. So I'm going to grab it. A rough cut, and then I'm going to hit Command J, duplicate it. Now I need to make that blend better with my background, with this. And so the first thing I'm going to do is going to play with adjustments of this background. So I'm going to go to Image Adjustments. I'm going to start with Levels. I'm going to use the Midtone slider. That's going to push it darker or lighter. I want to push it a little bit darker, and then I'm going to take my highlights and push them a little bit brighter. I don't think my shadows need to go any darker. I'm going to lose pixel content. If I want to dim the highlights, I use what are called the limiting sliders at the bottom here. So what did that do? It took it from this to this. That's levels. I just brightened it up, gave it a little bit more contrast. Next, I'm going to go to Image Adjustments, Color Balance. This is my favorite one. And I'm going to push it a little bit more towards the blues and greens. Start with the midtones. Then I'm going to go to the highlights, push it a little bit more towards the yellows, just a tiny bit, and the reds. And then the shadows push a little bit more towards the blues. If you warm your highlights and cool your shadows, you're going to get more dimensional depth. So what did that do? It went from this to this. Quite a bit more kind of color reference. So from this, with levels, to this, with color balance, to this. The last adjustment we use is hue saturation. This is for big shifts, just to make sure you like where it is. And I can shift the entire kind of psychedelic hue. And I just push it a little bit to one side or the other and see what fits better. So for me, it's going to be going a little bit more towards the warms by about 6 steps. And then do I want it more saturated? No. Do I want it less saturated? No. Let's put it about there. I don't want to play with lightness here because levels does that better. So what a hue saturation did, it went from here to here, just a little bit more balanced. Now I put this on top of it, and I'm going to start blending it in, like so. And I'm going to play with those same levels. So adjustments, levels. First, do I want it to go brighter? I want it to go brighter. And then I want the darks to go darker. Just a little bit. I don't want the whites to go brighter because then I lose pixels. So that's why it's always safe to play with the midtone slider first. Next, color temperature. This one's way too yellow. So I'm going to go to color balance. I'm going to push the midtones away from the yellow, towards the blue. A little bit towards the cyan, a little bit towards the magenta to counter the green. Then I'm going to go to the highlights, push back into the yellow a tiny bit. Shadows, push back into the blue and the cyan. So what's that difference? Went from this to that with levels to that with color balance. Big change. Last one. Image adjustment, hue saturation. I'm just going to push the hue back and forth, and I think I'm pretty much right where I want to be. I don't want it more saturated, maybe a little less saturated. Okay, now how do I blend these two together? I've corrected their color. I want to blend them together. Let me see my other elements on top. I don't need anything in the foreground, so we're just talking about this canopy at the top. And so the only thing I really need to blend is I need to get rid of this tree in the foreground. So I'm going to use my eraser on this layer, and I'm going to use it at 100% opacity, really large, 0% hardness, and I'm going to start erasing that out. And you see how the colors and the values are looking better. They're matching a little bit better, except that sky is a little bright, so I might, whoops, let's go back. Go back to here, and I'm going to take that eraser down. Do 100% because this is a really sharp kind of foreground object I don't need. But then this I'm going to take down at a lower opacity. So it shows me my canopy, but not with such a bright color. And the rest I think I should be able to keep. Okay, now the fun thing. I've got my Gothic cathedral here. Now I know what my background setting looks like. I want to make these colors match. So I'm going to go first to Image, Adjustment, Levels. I'm going to say, do I want it to be a little bit brighter? Or do I want it to be a little bit darker? I actually want it to be a little bit darker because that light's going to come through those windows. But I don't want to push it where I lose pixel definition. So I use that mid-tone slider to move it a little bit to the right to make it darker. Do I want to emphasize the highlights a little bit, give more contrast? Just a bit. That would be the reflected light. That's levels. Now I go to color balance. And this is subtle on gray rock, but I think I want to push the midtones a little bit more towards cyan. What I love about these is you can kind of push it around and see. You can mess around and find out. So I'm going to move the highlights a little bit more towards the warms and the shadows a little bit more towards the cools. Even subtle changes will make a big difference. I'm liking that. That's looking good. Now, last one. Hue saturation. Big shifts. Do I want it all to move this way or all to move that way? Well, it looks a little bit better moving that way. And then do I want it more saturated? No. Do I want it less saturated? No. I want it right about where it was. All right, so that's the change. Started here, levels, color balance, hue saturation, always in that order. Now I can cut this out cleanly. This is where a tablet is helpful, because I can use Magic Wand for some of it. I'm going to use the Magic Wand. We're in a new version of Photoshop. You'll find it 4th tool down. I'm glad they added it because this wasn't in the 2023 by default. And click on the Magic Wand, click on Contiguous. I can click outside, hold down Shift, and hope it does a good cutout. What's nice is I already increased the contrast. You can even get inside the windows. I'm holding down Shift so it adds. And I already softened the edges. So I'm going to try to select all that sky, and I'm trying to be careful that it doesn't get into the building itself. Though what's nice about doing ruins is if I chip some away, that's not the end of the world. So I'm selecting all around this thing. I'm selecting in the windows. Sometimes you have to zoom in with Command+. I won't do all the windows just so I can show you what it does and what it doesn't do. Okay, and then I just hit delete. Voila. Then I hit Command D to deselect. And you can see that's where it was there. Now it looks like this. And that background is shining through, and that color seems to match. Where it doesn't match is where I haven't deleted it out yet. Hold down Shift. Use the Magic Wand with Contiguous turned on. And you might ask, why hold down Shift and click on so many things? Why not just turn off Contiguous and have it select everywhere at once? Like that. It gets in all the windows. The problem is, until you make it empty, it will select those pixels everywhere, including in your brick. And so you'll delete parts of your building you don't want to delete. So I'm going to turn Contiguous on as long as I have things to get rid of. If I want to add to my selection, I just hold down Shift. But because my colors match, if I miss something, it's still going to be pretty close. Because it can be really nitpicky, especially with man-made objects. All right. So we're learning how to use Magic Wand. Now, Magic Wand will leave little debris like this sometimes. That's why I use my eraser. And I'm using my tablet. So I can do a 100% soft-edged eraser, but pretty small. Because with my tablet, even though the circle is overlapping things I don't want to erase, if I don't press very hard, I can really control it. Okay, do you see that green there and the brown there? That's called anti-aliasing. That's the edges around the cathedral that are making it look more believable and softer edged. The problem is they don't match the color of what's around it. So now, to get rid of that, it's like a little aura they have. I'm going to use Magic Wand. Now that I've cleared it out, I'm going to select all of that background. And I'm actually going to do it with Contiguous turned off. So I deselect, so it gets in all the windows too. And now this is a beautiful selection option. You say Select and Mask up in your Magic Wand tools. And then you're going to set it to Remember Settings, because this is how we're always going to use it. You're going to increase the radius by about 5 . Okay? Then you're going to feather